Every system of belief or unbelief in the world carries with it certain implications that if the belief system is true, then those implications must be true as well. One way to show the belief system to be flawed is to show that the implications are false.
Isn't that all well and lovely, and certainly something that can be applied to much of, if not all, religious frameworks? Unfortunately, this dipshit is about to apply it to atheism, something that is categorically not a worldview and or belief system. As always, it is a single claim about the beliefs that a single person usually might have in regards to a single claim that another might make. Do you believe the God real? No, in answer to that, cannot ever be a complete system of belief, and anyone claiming otherwise is either an idiot or a liar. Probably both. Good start.
The idea that God doesn't exist implies several ideas that can't be true. Let's look at 5 reasons that atheism fails.
Well, I don't know what implications you're going to throw out, but what's the betting that they are 5 implications that have literally nothing to do with whether or not God exists? But you really want it to be the case, so you can say it am the fake. Not to mention the idea that even if these things aren't true under atheism, it could very well be because they aren't true at all.
First, atheism implies that human free will doesn't exist. Atheistic biologist William Provine stated, "Naturalistic evolution has clear consequences. Human free will is non-existent."
Jumping right into something that is just catastrophically wrong. First off, one person's, atheist or not, belief doesn't reflect the entire of philosophies that are atheist, because duh. As second, free will could easily be true without the need for the God-mans. First off, you're assuming that atheism means some form of pure deterministic naturalism, where everything has to be a reaction to something else. So then free will would just be a reaction to something that has happened, therefore you had to react that way, but atheism doesn't necessarily discount the idea of things beyond the universe. So, say a free will wave could exist, giving us all that ability. Or that free will is simply a brute fact about the universe, as unsatisfying as brute facts tend to be. But dissatisfaction doesn't equal untrue. And then we dive into the various forms of compatibilism, and yeah, your first point, exactly as predicted, is something that atheism essentially doesn't give a shit about either way. Well done.
Renowned atheist Sam Harris wrote an entire book on the subject of human free will, and he stated, "Free will is an illusion. Our wills simply are not of our own making." Atheist Anthony Cashmore stated, "We have no more free will than a bowl of sugar." These atheists admit that if free will exists, then atheism is false.
No, I think you'll find that they are saying they personally are unconvinced that free will is a thing. If you somehow manage to irrefutably prove that free will was a thing, which you absolutely can't, and I do not believe for 1 second that you are going to do so in a 5-minute video, but if it were possible and someone did it, all that would mean, assuming that you hadn't also proven God in the meantime, is show that free will is a thing. And as stated, that is perfectly explicable and acceptable in many, many, many atheist frameworks. Womp womp.
Their solution is to deny human free will. However, the fact that you're choosing to watch this video right now proves you have free will. If humans do have free will, by all accounts, atheism is false.
Wrong. And no, they deny it because they don't believe in it. It has little to nothing to do with their atheism. Also, you think I chose to do this? I think you'll find I just woke up from a haze of whiskey and handsomeness and found this video playing in my timeline. As soon as I heard you say something stupid, well, I simply had to respond. So, as soon as you started speaking whatsoever. And yeah, your proof for free will is that you think free will is real. Completely missing the idea I joked about. If free will isn't real and an illusion, so to speak, then as much as you think you chose, you kinda didn't. But that doesn't mean you could tell either way, dumbass.
Second, according to atheism, if humans don't have free will, then they can't be held responsible for their actions. If atheism is true, there's no such thing as human moral responsibility.
Wow, you are just knocking it out of the park with being wrong constantly Olympics. Christ. Again, this is of course nothing to do with what atheism says about anything, and again assumes that atheism means anything that isn't specifically God can't exist, when of course almost everything you might attribute to "cause God do dat" can of course have many more possible explanations. Morals and the responsibility thereof is something that absolutely can and does exist, without the need for any sort of supernatural enforcement. We know this because it happens without a God-man turning up and saying, "You need to do these things." And no, the Bible doesn't count because A, basically every single thing we all agree of as moral existed well before the Bible, and B, much of it is in fact morally repugnant, making it appear that morality exists in spite of God's possible existence, not because of it.
Atheistic biologist Jerry Coyne, in a speech titled "You Don't Have Free Will," stated, "I don't consider myself morally responsible because I don't have a choice." Again, Anthony Cashmore said, "From this simple analysis, surely it follows that individuals can't logically be held responsible for their behavior."
Isn't it strange that secular morality exists, including the idea of responsibility for one's actions, but for some reason you've not brought that idea up, instead choosing to cherry pick specific quotes from atheists saying things that sound like they show your point. Of course, that entirely assumes you aren't being a dishonest dirtbag who takes small portions of what someone says and then go on to ignore their grander point. But you wouldn't do that, would you, Kyle TOOH? But the TOOH stands for talks out of his, just so you know.
You see, if we don't have a choice, then we aren't responsible. But each one of us knows that we have felt very real guilt when we've chosen to do things that we knew were wrong. If humans can be held morally responsible for their behavior, atheism can't be true.
Dude, just because the sensation of guilt exists does not immediately mean that free will is real. Again, as one of your quotes said, illusion. An illusion would not be very good if you knew exactly what was happening and why. Also, while we are still on free will, I just want to remind everybody that if there is a God and he is omniscient, that means it is not possible for you to do anything other than the things he knows that you're going to do, thus negating the possibility of choice. Funnily enough, theism often makes free will even less likely than under atheism.
Third, according to atheism, real objective moral right and wrong can't exist.
Getting real tired of you being wrong all the time, boss. Again, objective morality doesn't necessitate the existence of a deity. There could be objective right and wrongs that just pour forth from the universe itself. But the thing is, the way the universe actually works really suggests there is no objective morality anyway. The fact that if you took two people, twins even, have them grow up the exact same with the same belief system and effectively the same body and brain, close as you can get anyway, and then had them answer a few thousand moral quandaries, I know for a fact that they would not, hell, probably could not answer with the exact same answers, because that's just the nature of human experience. It will always be a little bit different. So there's always differences that make people different. In a universe with objective morality, this really shouldn't be a problem. And yet,
Charles Darwin stated that if a person doesn't believe in God, he can have for his rule of life, as far as I can see, only to follow those impulses and instincts which are the strongest, or which seem to him the best ones. As philosopher Jean Paul Sartre admitted, everything is indeed permitted if God does not exist.
Again, using quotes that make your point and completely ignoring the fact that atheists who wholeheartedly disagree with those positions not only exist, but have built entire atheism-adjacent worldviews to that fact. And to riff on the Sartre point, the irony of using that in order to argue for God is hilarious. When, of course, the number of explicit atrocities carried out in God's name in the Bible alone suggests that while, okay, everything is permitted if God doesn't exist, but if he does, the absolute worst of them are demanded.
If it's true that it is objectively wrong to murder innocent people just for fun, then by all accounts, atheism can't be true.
The addition of just for fun accidentally reinforces my previous point beautifully. Cause sure, you probably wouldn't argue that the dashing of babies on rocks was just a laugh riot, but you can't deny it was something that was done not only for God, but because he wanted it. Also, again, even if there is no fact of morality, that is what it is because it is, that doesn't mean that subjective morality doesn't exist, and certainly doesn't mean it has no value. Because of course it does. Morals have existed since long before humans invented religion, and I am sure it will continue to exist even if somehow religion goes away. And it won't be there because God says so, but because moral values are extremely useful for the survival of many, if not all, conscious species, regardless of where it may or may not have come from.
Fourth, if atheism is true, human life is meaningless.
Right, I am so sick of this one, because it fundamentally refutes itself. Meaningless according to who? I know, cause God am give them meanie boys, but without it there am no meaning, blah 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 blah. But that doesn't work, because as soon as you decide something doesn't have meaning, you are applying a standard of meaning to that, and accidentally making meaning happen. That is to say, that if there's a scale of naught to meaning, if anything in the universe has any kind of meaning, then meaning exists, and suddenly human life has to have some on some level. Otherwise, your judgment of meaninglessness is ironically meaningless. Also, does anybody else taste copper?
Atheist Alex Rosenberg wrote, "What is the purpose of the universe?" in his book, The Atheist's Guide to Reality. He stated, "There is none." What is the meaning of life? Ditto. Meaning there is none. Atheist Graham Lawton, the executive editor of New Scientist magazine, wrote a very brief article titled The Meaning of Life. His first line read, "The harsh answer is, it has none." Dan Barker wrote, "You and I are like ants or rats or pieces of broccoli, really, in the big picture. We are no different than a piece of broccoli in the cosmic sense."
This entire thing is just endless goddamn quote mining. It's like professional training in it. Goddamn. So again, of course, some atheists say is not the same as atheism means X. That's just not how it works. It'd be like me quoting the Pope to a bunch of Protestants about papal infallibility, and then somehow claiming that means Christianity doesn't exist. It's idiotic madness. Atheism and nihilism, while often associated, aren't the same thing. Again, there could be purpose to the universe without a God dictating one. And not just with the whole meaning is simply a human-generated concept that they apply to things including themselves, and especially to God, but again, as something that could be coming from elsewhere. A meaning field, a brute fact, etc. As always, the universe is under no obligation to explain itself or how parts of it work to you. And the thing is, even if God did make the universe, what makes you think he did so with a specific purpose in mind? Humans do things all the time without being able to explain why they did it or what it's even for. Hell, the entire field of creativity is often mired in the desperate search for the meaning of creative pieces of work. Hell, you want one actually semi-plausible God quote-unquote proof? It'll be the first of this video. If humans were indeed made in the image of God, then life not having meaning starts to make a whole lot more sense.
If a human life has more objective value than a stalk of broccoli, atheism can't be true.
Well, of course, as a connoisseur of both broccoli and hating on the humans, it appears to me that you just shot yourself in the foot with that one. Also, it immediately made me think of Mob Psycho 100 and its divine tree, which I don't know if any of you have noticed, but it looks suspiciously like a stalk of broccoli to me, which then made me realize that any given human, or even group of them, hell, even all of them, could absolutely value a single meaningless in the grand scheme of the universe thing as having more value than any given human life. That's just how value works. It is given to thing, in humanity's case, by humans. And if for some reason they decided that, yes, in fact, this lentil or random puck cell,
look at that, oh, my puck cell,
or whatever, is just more valuable than your average human, they are gonna think that. Then there's the case of context. In a situation where resources are scarce, a small amount of food's value can and often does exceed the value of a human life, sometimes by quite a wide margin. Is that disturbing to the point where we should do our best to avoid that happening? Yes, of course, but that doesn't make it any less true. And in that case, according to your logic, atheism would automatically be proven correct. Oopsie daisy. Or perhaps oopsie broccoli would be more appropriate.
Fifth, atheism demands that nothing spiritual or supernatural exist in the world.
Oh my God does not exist. No, it doesn't. God does not equal all possible forms and ideas related to the supernatural, you thick twonk. There are atheists who believe in all sorts of mystical hoo-ha, magical bunkum, and various forms of spiritual hokum. And 1,000 points for guessing if I'm one of them. The fact that many atheists don't tend to believe in ghosts or any other unnatural quote-unquote phenomena doesn't mean that they all think like that, you absolute giga-twit. This is the problem with so many forms of theism. They genuinely think that they own any and everything related to their ideology. It's the same as morality or, this. That just because your thing talks about the supernatural doesn't mean the opposite of your thing is no supernatural whatsoever, or indeed no morality. They are just different.
Now that would mean humans have no soul. It would imply there is no such thing as real love or courage or virtue.
Whoa. Love or courage or virtue. These are not supernatural states of affairs. What the hell are you talking about? Love specifically is a state of being that humans experience, that they applied a name to. But it is a feeling. This is like saying that in order to feel hungry, it requires a supernatural explanation, which it of course absolutely doesn't. Or courage, that's just the feeling of fear being overcome. And virtue? It's not even a feeling. It's a valuation, again, one that humans obviously made. And all of this is ignoring the simple fact that many atheists believe in souls. It is often a matter of definition, like collective consciousness or what have you, but again, a soul could exist without there being some guy outside the universe deciding it do so.
But what we call love or virtue would just be a mechanism to pass on our genetic information.
Again, I really have no idea what the hell you think virtue is, but it's just a thing that humans call certain behaviors, not some sort of cosmic quality that could only possibly exist via magic, making it even more confusing when you compare it to basically serotonin release as a physical manifestation of love. Like, who the hell has ever gotten laid because someone is in virtue with them, for atheism's sake?
Richard Dawkins stated that humans are survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve selfish molecules known as genes. In a very real sense, if you have ever really unselfishly loved another person, atheism can't be true.
Wow, we have gone all the way down to just one quote mine at this point. Must be running dry. And it also has nothing to do with the supernatural. Because I don't think any atheist, and frankly any smart theist, would define love as an actual supernatural construct. Since it, happens. So a real hard fail for that one. Nice.
Ultimately, atheism strips humanity of everything that makes us human. It denies our free will, our moral responsibility and sense of real right and wrong. It robs our lives of purpose and any real meaning, and it slanders every commendable attitude of love, virtue, and kindness as a manipulation strategy we use to pass on our DNA.
Translation: I decided that atheism is incompatible with a bunch of things that have absolutely nothing to do with it. Therefore, God. Not gonna lie, it's not a great argument, or even a good one, or even a bad one. It's so bottom of the barrel scrapingly awful that I'm surprised a person could make it without collapsing into a singularity of stupid on the spot.
In light of this information, C.S. Lewis's conclusion as he abandoned atheism still rings true.
Oh, Christ shitting C.S. Lewis. That's what the first two letters stand for. You guys always bring him up, and every time it's been an absolutely ridiculous argument that makes me wonder why anyone takes stock in anything that he has ever said, as it's always so utterly vacuous.
Consequently, atheism turns out to be too simple.
It is, in fact, as I explained at the very beginning, not supposed to be complicated. That is why no person with half a brain thinks that it's a complete worldview. And the fact that it isn't should give you pause as to exactly what it as an idea is even attempting to achieve, which is to say one thing instead of goddamn everything. If you and your mate here were just a little smarter, you might have understood that. And by a little, I mean moving from world-endingly stupid to simply kind of dumb.